Hello, my name is Cody Hobbs, and I am the writer and director of the documentary Hate City. I've been wanting to do a director's commentary for this for quite some time. I kind of feel like 4 years, the documentary was released just a little over 4 years ago, is sort of a perfect time to do it and to kind of see how things have changed and escalated in our society and sort of with the political climate. So this opening bit here, this opening monologue with these clips was something that I spent, I think, a good 2 or 3 weeks sort of putting together just this part here and kind of fine tuning it and getting the timing of the clips just right. And I think this is one of those dangers of sort of putting something together and getting it perfected, especially in a documentary, and working so hard on it that, when you have it done, you don't want to go back and change it or change anything. But as you may know, the story of a documentary is sort of found in the edit. And I kind of feel like what this documentary is actually about, or what the actual theme of this documentary is, sort of changed as I was putting this together and as things sort of developed, not just in Marietta, the town where this takes place in, but in the nation as a whole. That I probably should have adjusted this opening monologue just a little bit and sort of changed it to fit what this documentary is about a little bit more. Now, this opening credit sequence here, I think, does really get to the heart of what this documentary is about. This documentary is about the raising or the rising temperature of the political discourse in our country, and I think this really kind of encapsulates that. This is one of the parts of the documentary, or one of the parts that I am probably most proud of that I put together here. And there we have the text. Okay, the text could have been a little bit better. I think the text looks a little bit cheesy, but these are some of my friends who helped me put this thing together, or give me guidance, or give me advice. And I especially want to give a thank you to Andrew Edgecombe, my best friend. He lives out in Arizona. I was living in Southern California at the time, but he was such a big help. He watched every minute of footage that I put together. He gave me some very honest sort of criticism and guidance on things that I were doing right and some things that I were doing wrong. So now we get into the first act of the documentary proper. And something that I think some documentary filmmakers forget, or especially documentary filmmakers that are either just out of college or working on their first documentary, is a documentary is no different than a fictional narrative, in that it still has to tell a story. There still has to be sort of something of that traditional three-act structure. And here I kind of, really tried to follow that Sid-filled setup where, the first act, you show things, show a normal day in the life of your protagonist. And in this case, the protagonist is the town of Marietta itself. And then you sort of show the inciting incident, what upsets the normal status quo and sort of sets things into action. And so this whole thing is just sort of setting up the type of town that Marietta is. It's a suburban area. It has a very low crime rate. It's not the kind of place that you would expect a hateful protest to spring up, and certainly not the kind of place that you would expect that kind of a protest to draw the ire of the national media. This guy. So finding the subjects that were going to be in the documentary, When I first went out to make this, I posted an ad to Craigslist and sort of posted on my Facebook, and I thought, okay, this is going to be, easy street. I'm going to post these ads saying that I'm making a documentary about this subject, and the inquiries are going to come to me. And I got no inquiries on that. And so that was one of the first of many, many moments that I wanted to give up and, stop making this. And it was just going to be too hard. This was definitely a low budget, no budget product. For me, this was a negative budget project. I was unemployed. I actually got sober during the course of making this documentary. I'm a little over 6 years sober today as I record this. And hang on, this scene here. So whenever I show this documentary to other friends, or I'm actually in the room with someone as they're watching the documentary, that little visual gag there is probably the one that gets the best reaction out of people, and it actually kind of makes me feel good getting to watch people react to that. The hardest thing to do is comedy, and you'll hear that from writers and comedians and actors because it either lands or it doesn't. And the worst thing you can do is you try to set something up that is intended to be funny or to be a joke and to not have any reaction to it. So this is sort of, setting up what the inciting incident is. The buses are coming to this quiet town of Murrieta. And yes, hate and bigotry. That doesn't sound like the town that I grew up in. This house here, and I probably should have blurred that address, but that was the house that I was living in. Not while I was making the documentary, but that was the house that I lived in when I went to high school in Murrieta.
There had to be more to the story than what was being splashed in the headlines. I wanted to find out how all...
And this shot here, this is something that will go absolutely nowhere. This was probably the most nervous that I was in filming the documentary. Like I said, I posted an ad on Craigslist, got absolutely no response. And so to get interviews for this, what I did is every day for I think a good couple of months, I would throw my camera in the back of my car and I would go to various businesses and tell people that I was making a documentary about the immigration protest in Murrieta and ask if they wanted to do an interview. And so that's how I ended up getting all of the interviews that I got in this documentary.
They were transferring the undocumented immigrants who were detained in Texas. It all happened at a town hall meeting.
Something that after the final project was finally released online, Tank, or Andrew Edgecombe, one of the executive producers on this, sort of called out that this documentary contained a whole lot of footage that I didn't shoot. And he's right, and there are a couple of reasons for that. And the number one reason is, as I said, this was a no-budget documentary, and during the course of getting things put together and getting things edited, the the laptop that I was using to edit this with crashed. My hard drive completely died, and I ended up losing every bit of footage, every interview that I had shot for this. And when that happened, I thought it was kind of game over. I gave up for a good few months on even attempting to finish this documentary and put it together. But fortunately, because Andrew lives in a different state, the way that I would sort of share rough cuts of sequences that I was putting together was uploading them to YouTube and sharing them with them that way. And I didn't have a whole lot uploaded to YouTube at the point where when my laptop crashed and I lost everything. I think I had maybe a grand total of about 25 minutes, maybe about 20, 30 minutes maybe of interview footage. Um, and finally I kind of got to a point where I had been talking about wanting to make a movie, make something. Since as long as I can remember, it had been my life's dream to make something. And I knew that I had to find a way to finish this thing and do something with it. So I found news clips and some B-roll footage and ended up writing quite a bit more narration than what I thought I was going to initially write for this thing. And that's what you're seeing now. But with that said, I do think that this kind of exists in somewhat of a gray area because I, didn't have any money when I made this. I wasn't able to license the music. I wasn't able to actually pay and license the news footage that I used for this. I do feel, certainly feel conflicted about that. But when I was putting this together, it became apparent that this wasn't something that was ever going to see a theatrical release. This is not something that I have ever tried to sell or make any profit off of. So in putting this together and in the music that I chose, my mentality behind it was make this documentary as if I had a $5 million budget. Make this documentary as if I could license any music track that I wanted, license any bit of news footage that I wanted, and make this documentary exactly the way that I wanted to.
And words alone will not do it. So if we don't see it,
and this is actually a bit of B-roll, and I do credit the person who shot this. I think this was from the 10-round Patriot. I was really heavy into drinking when the protest was actually happening. And so I didn't get to grab my camera and actually make it out while the protests were actually happening. But there were quite a few people who did, and I was able to use some of that footage. This was an interview that I conducted myself. This looks like it is in someone's backyard, but that's actually at the Catholic Church in Murrieta. The reason why I was there, I wanted to speak with, someone from the church, because I know that, the Catholic Church is big on, taking in people who don't have anywhere else to go, and I just wanted to sort of get their opinion on it. Of course, no one from the church wanted to speak with me, but there was this the kid in the interview. He was in the courtyard and overheard me talking to someone, and I asked if he would be willing to do an interview, and that's how I got that interview. And this part here is one of those moments that when I first saw this footage, it kind of made me choke up a little bit. Not because it's exceptionally violent. This is pretty tame, especially compared to the protests that we've had since I made this. But I think that this is one of those things that when I first saw this footage, it felt like then a harbinger of what was of things to come, of sort of the political climate that this country was sort of headed towards. And I'm going to kind of stop talking for just a minute and let you guys listen to this part here.
We were protesting there because we were fighting for the people that were illegal, and so they wanted us to like show them our IDs and stuff. I was like, I was asked for my ID from somebody that was on that side. I was like, you want to see like why? I didn't understand that they were being serious. That they thought that I was like some immigrant that was like illegal that had just jumped the border. And I was like, what? Like I've been living here since forever.
So I didn't, do any kind of pre-interview before I actually shot the on-camera interview, and when he said that people with brown skin who showed up to the protest were being asked for their IDs indiscriminately, I kind of think my jaw hit the floor. And then, of course, I just got lucky that I found this particular clip of this person at the protest getting asked if he what his immigration status is, and it's just one of those cuts that goes together so perfectly. Sometimes, especially when you're making a documentary, you just gotta get lucky.
Oh, look at you! Oh, you ain't gonna do it. You ain't gonna do it. Hey, I don't really trust nobody. I was born in a rough neighborhood.
And so for anyone who's listening to this, it feels weird during the times when I sort of talk about the things that I did right. It sort of feels like I'm kind of patting myself on the back a little bit. But I certainly am aware that there are definitely problems with the way that this documentary turned out. It did not turn out perfectly, but at the same time, I worked off and on this documentary for the better part of 2 years, and a lot of hard work goes into that. And so there certainly are some times in watching this when things sort of turn out well that I do feel particularly proud of. And this here is the introduction of the villain of the piece. And speaking of things that I'm proud of, I really do like the way that I sort of introduce her. First, you hear just her voice talking over the B-roll of people at the Murrieta immigration protest, shouting insults at each other, and her saying that it was awesome to see the people coming and standing up for themselves. And then she says this.
Our reputation was ruined. I think we woke up the country. And I'm proud of what Murrieta did. It's we the people that own this country and own this city, and it's time we take it back.
Ladies and gentlemen.
And speaking of things that just kind of lead perfectly into each other, her saying that, Murrieta woke the nation up and it's time that we take this country back, and then boom, we cut to Donald Trump announcing and then winning his bid for presidency. When the immigration protest first took place, I think it was before. Actually, yeah, I'm certain it was before Donald Trump had even announced that he was going to run for president. So, at the time that this was taking place, I don't think anyone had any idea that Donald Trump would run. No one certainly thought that Donald Trump was going to win the presidency, and I don't think people really expected for his presidency to end the way it did, with our nation's capital being, for the first time, breached. And for the first time in our nation's history, a Confederate flag was flown in the halls of our Congress. Another criticism that I had gotten from my executive producer Andrew on this documentary is that I spent just a little too long on this Donald Trump bid, and I kind of definitely have to agree with that. I could have trimmed the speech, by a good minute, and I think it still would have gotten the point across. So that's definitely one of those areas that I could have improved on there. Also, one of the comments that he made after I had the final cut put together and after I released it on YouTube is, and you'll notice this as we get further into the documentary, is I have sort of these little mini vignettes or these little mini ideas, and they sometimes only feel like they tangentially relate to sort of what the driving story of the documentary is. And he said that the documentary either needed to be 30 minutes shorter or 30 minutes longer. And 30 minutes longer meaning that I should have taken those little bits and those little vignettes and done a little bit better of a job in tying them together with sort of the central theme, the central idea of what this documentary was. And the Donald Trump section, I think, is one of those things that I could have done a better job of linking the attitude that the people at the Murrieta protest had being sort of what led to Donald Trump getting elected and sort of what led to the craziness that his administration became. Of course, I released this. I think this released, I'm looking at the date now, it looks like it released 3 days after his inauguration. So at the time that I had the final cut completely put together, it was still kind of up in the air on exactly what his presidency would look like. I don't think anyone thought that it was going to be a particularly calm or peaceful presidency. I don't think we really could have anticipated that so many Americans and so many people would have, fallen not just into Donald Trump's rhetoric, but fallen down the QAnon conspiracy rabbit hole and just some of the other craziness and nastiness that we have seen during the last 4 years, and in particular in the last year, with coronavirus and with the Black Lives Matter protests, and then with the insurrection at the Capitol.
9 brothers and sisters in total, and my dad has the same 9 brothers and sisters. So it was a big family that they came from, and the way that they describe it was kind of like, third world country kind of thing, like what you see on a commercial, send 10 cents a day kind of thing. That's kind of what they were living in.
So this is one of those sections of the documentary that I think feels like I could have used a few more interviews, and I definitely agree. These were the few people that I could find that had some kind of experience with immigrating into the United States, and his parents, did immigrate here illegally, and I do wish that I could have kind of expanded on, how difficult the process of immigrating to the United States is, and why so many refugees, do go the illegal route than doing it the proper route. But especially people whose immigration status is still up in the air, they're very reluctant to go on camera and talk about it, and especially with someone who is a no-name filmmaker like I was and like I still am when I made this. So I feel fortunate to have gotten the people on camera that I did, but I do wish that I could have gotten some more interviews to sort of really flesh out what that process is like and how difficult it is. And this upcoming part and this upcoming section from the story of Nadia. She is a Palestinian immigrant who is living in Murrieta, and you might be wondering if they are protesting illegal immigration from Mexico. What does her story have to do with anything? And I kind of, bend over backwards to make it fit into the documentary, and my honest answer is probably not much. I think Nadia has such an interesting story. Like, I think that you could make an entire documentary just on her and her life living in Palestine and finding a way to come to the United States and what her life was like in Palestine. I think that could be the subject of its own documentary. I'm not so sure how well it fits in here, but like I said, I sort of had slim pickings on who I could find to interview for this, and she just so happened to be Andrew Edgecombe, the executive producer on this documentary's parents' neighbors in California. And so his mom told her that I was doing a documentary about the immigration protests that took place, and she knew that she was an immigrant herself, and that her immigrant status when she first immigrated to the United States was not legal, and asked if she would be willing to sit down and do an on-camera interview with me, and she was kind enough to let me into her home and do an interview. And so, of course, her story had to make it into this documentary in some way. And this was one of the last pieces that I was putting together of my rough cut right before my laptop died and I lost all of my footage. And so there is actually quite a bit more to her story than what you see in this documentary. And she actually does kind of go into what her actual process was like in becoming a legal citizen. And I didn't have that put together. I had never uploaded any of that portion to YouTube. So when my laptop died, all of that footage was lost. And what you see here is everything that remains from my interview with her, which I think is kind of unfortunate.
In 2014, Nadia returned to Palestine to have her daughters baptized at the Church of Bethlehem.
But as I kind of watch this along with you guys as I am doing this commentary, I do think that she does kind of give some good wisdom and some good insight into how we view immigrants when she talks about taking her young children back to Palestine, her daughter back to Palestine, to have her baptized at the Church of Bethlehem, and just how her young daughter noticed the stark difference between the two cultures, and just how oppressive the Palestinian culture is, and how much better life is in America. And what she's saying right now, she's saying that she came back. Her plane left the airport, the Ben Gurion airport, just hours before the airport was shut down, and she barely made her flight back to the United States. So like I said, she really does have just an incredible story to tell. And whether it's me or someone else, I certainly think a entire documentary could be made about her. So now that we are about a half hour into this commentary, I figured now would be a good time to sort of explain who this commentary track is for. So if you've made it this far, thank you very much. But I wanted to, make this commentary track for people who kind of wanted some behind-the-scenes insight into how I made this documentary, how I went about getting the interviews, what the process of making this documentary was like. but also for people who are aspiring filmmakers, people who either are in film school or who don't, have the access to go to film school, and just talk about what it's like making your first project when you don't have a budget, when you don't have a crew, when you don't have the means to make something. And the first piece of advice that I can definitely give is your first project is not going to turn out perfect. It's probably not going to turn out to be a masterpiece. This is certainly no masterpiece, but I again do feel very fortunate that I had the opportunity to make this. A lot of aspiring filmmakers, even ones who go to film school, never end up making a feature-length anything. And, so in that regards, I'm very, very fortunate. I feel fortunate for, these interviews that I got, and for all of the help that I had, even just some of the people who watched it and sort of gave me notes and helped to make this just a little bit better. And this is the first on-camera clip, I think, of the mayor of Murrieta, or the mayor at the time that all of this happened, Mayor Alan Long. And this was probably the biggest get that I got in this documentary. I certainly didn't expect to get any politician or anyone from the city council, certainly not the mayor. And the way that I ended up getting his attention is I had started to post some
Aftermath of the protest.
early trailers online, and I'm sure when I popped up at the Border Patrol station and the fire station asking for interviews, he had sort of got wind that I was making this documentary, and he sent me a message on Facebook and offered to do a over-the-phone interview. And so we set that up, and he called and recorded this about an hour-long phone conversation. And I posted a second trailer, and I sort of included some of the audio from our phone conversation. And he wrote me another message, and of course I didn't have any kind of professional equipment to record the phone call. And he said, "Oh my goodness, you can hardly make out what I'm saying. I think I've reconsidered. I think I will do a sit-down interview with you." And so I thought, oh, this is absolutely amazing. I'm actually going to get an on-camera interview with the mayor of Murrieta. And it was shortly after that I went to my first AA meeting, or my first AA meeting of being sober this time. And I had my phone setting in the car, and when I got out of the AA meeting, I had a text message from Andrew saying that Alan Long had been arrested, and that he was in a car accident and was arrested for driving under the influence. And this happened before he did the on-camera interview, and at that moment, that was another one of those moments that I just wanted to quit trying to make this documentary, because I thought, well, that's it. There is no way he is going to sit down with me and do an on-camera interview. And after all that, he was still gracious enough to invite me to his home, and gave a pretty lengthy and a pretty extensive on-camera interview. And this woman here, I can't remember her name, but she was someone who Alan had referred me to to sort of get someone else's perspective. So this is probably the most popular portion of the documentary. I even cut out this segment and I uploaded it as a separate video to this YouTube channel, and it has slightly less views than the Hate City immigration documentary, but it is by far the most well-received thing that I have ever made, and it's kind of a trip. Like I look at the analytics, and it kind of tells you not just the location as far as like what state and what city people are watching this from, but it tells you the link or how they were referred to finding this documentary, and I'm finding that this is linked from I think a couple of universities. One of them is like either the University of Alabama or the University of Arkansas. I can't remember which. I have had comments on the video from educators asking if they could use this, that they teach journalism classes or teach classes of well, journalism, either in college or in high school, and ask if they can use this in their class, and it still kind of is a trip. Again, not to pat myself on my back and think that I made something so wonderful, but it's certainly more than I ever expected this to be. When I posted this on YouTube, I thought this would, like I said, maybe get a few views from my friends, and right now it has just over 27,000 views, which isn't, may not sound like a whole lot. It's not 1 million views, but it's way more than I ever could have expected for this little no-budget documentary that I put together. And this section on misleading journalism, I definitely think that I as well received as it is, I definitely think that I could have done better. This portion here with Nancy Grace, this is one of those things that I had an idea in my head of what I wanted this section to be and what I wanted to do, and I was really into watching Aaron Sorkin's The Newsroom at the time, and I had this clip from The Newsroom that I wanted to lead into, and they say in any kind of creative media you have to be able to kill your darlings, and by that you have, what that means is you have to be able to get rid of ideas, even ideas that you think are really good and ideas that you're really attached to, if they're not serving the greater story as a whole. And this is definitely one of those things that I don't really think serves the greater story as a whole, and probably should have been cut and replaced with something else. One person did point out that they can't believe that I didn't mention, in talking about fake news and in talking about incendiary news and news that sort of raises the political temperature and the temperature of the way that we discuss political issues, is Fox News, and that probably could have been replaced with talking about how much harm Fox News has done, and I'm really remiss for not including anything from about Fox News in this little segment. And I also think that this segment, does feel almost disjointed from the rest of the documentary. I've got a line, later of narration, much later in the documentary, that kind of sort of ties it together. But, like Andrew said, this documentary either needed to be 30 minutes longer or 30 minutes shorter. And I think that that's one of the areas that could have been a little bit longer, is doing a better job of linking this section to the overall theme of the documentary and how it sort of relates to the Marietta immigration protests. As it stands, it sort of feels like like an aside or sort of a mini documentary inside of another documentary, and almost feels kind of shoehorned in. Not as much as the French Revolution section that's going to be coming up, but you know, it doesn't quite flow as well as what I would have liked it to. You know, and I guess I do try to kind of loop it back around, but I definitely could have done a better job with that.
Out of control during the protest in Murrieta. In order to understand the answer, we need to go back to before it was ever announced that the buses were heading to Murrieta.
How did you first find out that
So as I mentioned, you know, all of the interview footage that I got was uploaded, or that I was able to salvage was uploaded to YouTube after I put together sort of a rough cut. And this one here, I really wish I would have been able to go back and kind of remaster some of the audio on. Some of the music, I think, is just a little bit too loud, and it kind of makes it a little difficult to hear what the people are saying. And this is the first time in the entire documentary that I have title cards for the people who I'm interviewing. The reason why I put them in so late is it was something that they did in the documentary, What the Bleep Do We Know? And, you know, probably not appropriate for this documentary, but, you know, the way that the reasoning behind why they did it that way, I was kind of like, oh, that's kind of neat. I'll do it with this documentary. And, you know, when you first start, you know, making your own films, you know, you definitely do kind of look at other things for inspiration, and you know, sometimes you take the wrong things from them. If you listen to the audio of Mayor Alan Long there, you kind of notice that his voice sounds really distant and it's not coming through really clear. I almost felt like I was destined not to get any usable footage with my interview from Alan. The phone interview, the audio came out just terrible. This interview, I actually did bring a separate camera person with me, and they had their own audio equipment. They were also novice filmmakers, but for some reason, and I let them do this, they said that the best place to put the microphone so it wouldn't be in the shot was directly behind him. And I thought, okay, you know, I didn't think anything of it. I was, you know, busy getting my notes prepared to interview Alan. And after it was shot, and after I went back and I listened to the audio recording of it, I went, oh my God, I can't hear a word he's saying. It came across so the volume was so low that you couldn't hear anything that he was saying. And so it took me a long time doing multiple passes trying to raise the gain on his audio just to get it to where you could even hear what he was saying. You know, so for any first-time filmmakers out there, expect to run into problems, and expect to run into problems so big that you're going to think that there's no way to salvage it and that you're going to want to quit. But don't quit. And I can't believe that we have made it this far into the documentary without talking about our star villain, Miss Diane Seraphin. She, at the time that I interviewed her, she was a candidate for a city council. Her claim to fame was being the red light camera lady. She was one of the people who started the petition to get rid of the red light cameras, which is kind of a good thing. But you know, she was someone I think that I talked to at the fire station gave her my phone number, and she was one of the people that helped to organize the immigration protest. And so I remember one day getting a phone call from her, and I knew right off the bat that she was going to be an entertaining interview, because as soon as I said hello, before she even said hello, the first words out of her mouth were, well, I feel so sorry for the black people.
And as soon as she said that, I was just like, oh man. If this is how she introduces herself, she is certainly going to be a character. And we met. We did our interview. She was there with Mr. Gibbs, and he had to leave early. But her and I interviewed her, I think, for about 2.5 hours, and it was during summer, so it was a good 90, I think 97, close to 100 degrees outside. And we were sitting outside, not in an air-conditioned building, and both of us were just, by the end of it, sweating profusely. But the things that she was saying were just such a gold mine that I had to keep going as long as I possibly could. And that's another one that, everything that you see here is every bit of footage of her that I had uploaded to YouTube. And like I said, I had over 2 hours of footage shot with her. And I really, really wish that I didn't lose all of that footage with her. And likewise with Alan, I think I was at his house for about 2.5 hours, close to 3 hours, and there's quite a bit of stuff from his interview that I lost that I wish would have been able to make it into the final documentary. And this is definitely one of those segments that I. If I would have had all of the footage, I would have spent a lot more time sort of trimming and putting together. But the rough cut that I put on YouTube, it already had the music track layered to it. It was sort of only ever a pseudo rough cut, and I wish that I could have taken another good 2 or 3 passes at reorganizing this and sort of making this segment better than what it turned out to be. Not that I think that it turned out just god awful, but I think that it could have been arranged in a more clear manner. But I think, no matter the state that this turned out in, I think just about any filmmaker, any artist, once they release their work and they go back and they look at it again, there are always things that you're going to want to tweak or change. Look at Francis Ford Coppola or Ridley Scott with Blade Runner. How many times has Ridley Scott recut Blade Runner? There's no denying the fact that the protest happened, or that things got out of hand. But the events leading up to it were so murky, polluted by a cloud of misinformation from numerous sources, including government agencies, it has to make you ask.
So with this little bit of narration, I do kind of try to tie together that news segment a little bit to how getting news sources from places like Breitbart led to people being so misinformed about what actually was going on with the immigrants that were going to be bused to Murrieta, that I think many of the protesters and many of the organizers of the protest were acting on bad information. And some of them certainly didn't care. There's a moment in that last section where, and Alan kind of smirks because he knew that the question was coming. That was something that we had talked about during the pre-interview when he said that he told Diana that there was nobody currently at the facility and that she was spreading misinformation, and he asked her to retract her statement and she refused. And you definitely get the indication, or I certainly got the indication, that he himself is not a fan of Diana Seraphin, and that he was well aware that there was some bad actors and some
bad misinformation that was being spread about how the situation was unfolding. So this section here, more than the news section, this section definitely feels sort of like the black stepchild of this documentary. It feels the most out of place. And I think thematically it certainly fits. I think the reason why it feels out of place really falls on my inability to really kind of tie it into the theme of this documentary. The French Revolution is my absolute favorite period in history. And this is one of those things. I would love to make a full-on documentary about the French Revolution. I'd love to make a movie about the French Revolution. I love talking about the French Revolution. And part of the reason why I love the French Revolution so much is because of how misunderstood and misremembered the French Revolution is. You know, when people talk about the French Revolution, they talk about it as being the birth of democracy in France. And it was this noble movement where the underclass stood up and they overthrew the monarch. And really what I think a lot of people don't know or they don't realize is, you know, Victor Hugo's novel, Les Miserables, however you pronounce it, The Miserables, took place about 60 to 70 years after the French Revolution. Napoleon Bonaparte, the Emperor of France, happened after the French Revolution. Members from King Louis XVI's family went on to sit on the throne of France as a monarch after the French Revolution. And why the reason why the French Revolution initially failed the way it did is because people got so wrapped up in violence and in bloodshed and in sending people to the guillotine that people got sick of the violence, and they would rather turn back to the old monarch and the old feudal system than continue seeing the rivers of blood being shed on the streets, that democracy wasn't worth it. And that's always kind of my warning when I hear people on both sides of the political spectrum, say that it's we're going to throw down these signs, we're going to pick up our guns, the time for peaceful protest is over, it's time to break out the gallows and send people to the guillotine. I think there's a lesson in how the French Revolution played out that certainly applies to these kind of situations. And that kind of leads into what is one of my favorite shots of the entire documentary is two of the protesters from opposite sides of the protest, actually sitting down and however briefly having a peaceful conversation.
With respect. Even those who immigrated to this country enjoy life in Murrieta.
And so we're coming up toward, I think we're just about to the end of the documentary. This time just flew by, and man, there is so much more I could say and so much more I could talk about with this documentary.
What would you think if we want to move to San Diego or to another county? She goes, no, Mom, I want to stay where I am. I love my high school. I love my friends. I want to stay where I am. I love it here, she goes.
Sorry, I had to take a sip of my sparkling water. Talking for an hour straight certainly makes my throat feel a little dry. So I kind of think I rushed into the conclusion of this documentary just a little bit, and
It's unfortunate. I think every town is going
and you know, I feel like this end section could have definitely been expanded a little bit, and I think this end section could have been expanded in a way that I could have tied together some of what felt like the disjointed elements. You know, the time that I spent talking about Donald Trump, the news media bit, the French Revolution bit. You know, I think this is where I really could have tied everything together and brought it home just a little bit better than what I than what I did. And you know, this is one of those things where, you know, I kind of had the ending of the documentary in mind. I think pretty early on in the process of making it.
I may not have the answer on how to solve the immigration
And this here, where I say that I don't have the answer on how to solve the immigration issue, certainly still holds true today. You know, I still have friends that, you know, I kind of go back and forth with a little bit on, you know, how we should handle the immigration issue. You know, I do have friends that think that, you know, we should stop financially supporting illegal immigrants. They should be deported. You know, but I think that the immigration issue is much more complicated than you know, just having a black and white solution. And that is it. That is the documentary, guys. Thank you for listening to me stumble through my very first director's commentary. Who knows? Maybe in another 4 years, or maybe in a little while from now, I will come back and I will do another director's commentary. Or I would absolutely love the opportunity to. Actually, I would love the opportunity to make a sequel to this. Because I think so much has sort of happened in the 4 years since I made this and since this released, that I would like to follow up on in more depth. And you know, I just love the process of filmmaking, and I would love to get the opportunity to make another film and to make another documentary. And I think it would definitely be a lot of fun to do a follow-up to this. It may not necessarily take place in Marietta, but do a follow-up to the idea of Hate City. So with that, thank you guys for watching. Once again, my name is Cody Hobbs, the writer and director of Hate City. Thank you guys very much.